being set up. If somebody who was here yesterday can just remind us, I'm teaching in a number of different places. What was the last letter we did? We finished the two Gimels. Gimels. Okay, we have this. Come back in. Thank you. Okay. So, a big thank you to Lori and Chet for you. Aside from making the whole program happen day in and day out, yesterday when we didn't get to finish through the viduy, they approached me and they said, we want to have this Aseres Hashem taped and transcribed so that we can send this out and people can hold on to it and carry it with them for the viduy on Yom Kippur. And since we got through letter Gimel, which is a pretty small percentage of the Aleph phase, we figured that we're going to see if we can get to a little more. I'll tell you in advance, I'm not going to do the whole viduy, but I hope as Hashem to get through maybe letter Mem or so maybe today with a few less stories and a few more facts. We discussed yesterday the fact that the goal of viduy is not meant to be this depressing, self-deprecating experience where I'm saying, I am so terrible and Hashem hates me and He's so disappointed in me. But rather, on Rosh Hashanah, we just identified what my highest spiritual strivings are, who I really want to be. But I know that there are certain habits, words, thought patterns that I have that are getting in the way of the goals of what I really want to become. And the goal of the viduy, as we said yesterday, is really to identify for Hashem, to Hashem, and for myself, to take responsibility for those areas that are blocking me from my highest side of self. And the viduy experience is actually meant to be this kind of extrication, regurgitating of the parts of me that are not really my essence. And we said yesterday that according to Rav Dessler, I brought one with me. Wet erase. That's what it is. Okay, an artisan should always come with his tools of trade, carry them with him.
They had a whole collection of.
They're in the back. Yeah, thank you.
The thick ones.
Yeah, thank you. Yesterday we were going through the viduy according to the understanding of Rav Dessler and Mechtav Me'Eliyahu. And his basic premise was that the goal of viduy is not just to try to identify what acts I've done wrong during the last year, but trying to dig a little deeper and try to understand the root causes, the root midos within ourselves as a person that are leading me to do certain things wrong. Because if I don't get to the root issue, it's going to be very hard to stop doing the things that I'm doing. We gave examples yesterday like prikas ol, not taking responsibility for things that we could be more involved in doing. We gave examples yesterday like onus, when a person feels that they're so under very strong pressure and they don't stand up for what's right. So these aren't acts I've done wrong, these are reasons of why I've done things wrong. Now, when a person's doing their viduy, if they remember specific acts that they did under that category, I was under onus, I was under a lot of social pressure, and therefore I dressed or I said certain things that I know I shouldn't have, if I can be specific in my viduy and say to Hashem, for example, when I was at that simcha, and I did, it's even considered a more ideal level viduy. Because the more specific I am, the more aware I'll be next time I'm in that situation. Don't get caught in that same mistake again. Now, since viduy is so long, usually, again, we're not going to be so specific every time in every single viduy. But again, a person can choose 5 each time, 10 each time, and say, during this viduy, I'm going to really focus on this group or this section. So yesterday, we went through the letter Gimel, and we were up to the Daleds, which are the third to last line on the sheet. Is there anyone who can get one? Great. Okay. So we were up to Chet shechatanu lefanecha b'dibur peh. So literally, these are sins that I've done with the speech of my mouth. Now, if you were here yesterday, there was another one we did that sounds very similar to this. Which one? Viduy Spasayim, which was expressions of the lips. That sounds like speech of the mouth the same way. Now, of course, both of these are referring to sins of speech. But again, Rav Dessler says, we're talking about not just what I did wrong, but what are the root reasons I did something wrong. With viduy spasayim, we spoke about the fact that sometimes I speak, but I'm only talking from my lips, not from my head. And I'm not really giving enough thought to the words before they come out. How will this other person feel if I say this thing? Is what I'm about to say really lashon hara, or is it not? So that's one root reason we do negative speech. Another root reason is dibur peh. Now you might remember from Chumash, there's a difference in Hebrew language between amar and diber. What's the difference? Amar is soft, diber is harsh or harsh. So literally, doesn't just mean speech of the mouth, it means with harsh speech of the mouth. Now, there are times in life that we all do need to be harsh. I'm disciplining my child. I'm a teacher in a classroom. I can't be soft every moment. But very often, at moments that I start becoming harsh, you can get so into the role of it. Like, yes, and didn't I tell you not to? And then I can just keep going and going and going. Every additional harsh word that I use that is not really necessary for the educational purpose that I'm trying to achieve is damaging and is detrimental and is an avera in its own right. So what I'm saying to Hashem is, sometimes this past year, my speech was harsher than it needed to be. Either I used more harsh words than were necessary, or even the initial words I said might have been stronger than I really needed to get across my point. Maybe we should just do a quick reminder. If I have somebody who did something for me, my spouse, my friend, and it really was hurtful, and I needed to change, how many lines do I need to do tochacha? Two lines. Basically, I need to tell them what bothered me. Now, what bothered me, basically, is a statement of an I, not you, right? Not, you were so insensitive. How dare you say that? But I was really hurt. It really bothered me a lot. And it's without any history. It's not like, you didn't take out the garbage. And to tell you the truth, this is the 10th time this month I've asked you to take out the garbage and you haven't taken it out. I remember in your parents' home, your mother used to always ask your father to take out the garbage, and he never did that either. Once I'm getting into all those additional dibur peh, the harsh words, that's not the thing that's going to inspire the other person to say, oh, thank you for pointing that out. I think I'm going to go take out the garbage now with zrizos and joy. If I tell them what the issue is, the garbage needs taking out. B, what do I want them to do about it? Would you be able to please take it out sometime in the next half hour? Tell them specifically, dirty socks on my side of the room. It's not a terrible thing. You didn't do anything wrong. But for me, it's just bothersome having the smelly socks on my side of the room. If you don't mind, put your dirty socks into the laundry directly. Now, does this guarantee that every time I say it with those 2 lines, I will get what I want? No. But is additional dibur peh and harsh language going to achieve it better? Also no. So what I'm saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu here is, this coming year, I want to try not to use harsher words than are necessary. I want to just get the points across and do it with respect and maintaining the dignity of the other person as I do it. Second Daled, Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'da'as u'b'mirma. Did we find the sheets or no?
Yeah, just give them out.
You just gave them out. Unbelievable. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Now, when we do bedas, that would be things that I did with knowledge. Ubemirma is the opposite, with trickery. So the simple meaning would be, there are times I did averos to a certain person, and I knew I was doing it, and they knew I was doing it. It was clear. And there are times that I was doing it in a very kind of underhanded way, where the other person didn't even realize that they were being harmed. Now, if you look at your new page that you were given, and you look under the letter Zayin, there's another viduy there that seems to be kind of overlapping or repetitive of this same idea.
I don't think this is that.
Bizada means on purpose. So isn't that the same as bedas, knowingly? But no two viduyim can be the same. So comes Rav Dessler and says, what does it mean to do a chet with knowledge? It doesn't just mean I knew it. It's using my knowledge to do an avera. So let's say I learned Hilchos Shabbos, and I found out that muktzah is not really midoraisa, muktzah is midrabanan. So next time I have a certain muktzah item exactly on the spot that I wanted clear. So what do I say to myself? Well, it's not really doraisa, it's the rabbanan, and the rabbanans aren't chiyuv kares, so it's not so serious if I move it aside. Now here I'm taking my informational knowledge, and instead of using the knowledge to help me do more and be more uplifted, I'm using it to rationalize and do less. So I'm saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu this year when I have das, when I have knowledge, I want to take that knowledge to help me only do things on a higher level, not to bring me down. This will also include not living up to the level of knowledge that we really have, according to Rav Dessler. So there are certain things that maybe when I was 18 or 16, I wasn't keeping because I just wasn't so aware of those halachos or those hashkafos. But as I grew in life, I learned more. And I should be at a level where, b'siyata d'shmaya, I'm living up to it. When I'm saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'das, there were certain things that the avera was that I wasn't consistent with the level of das that I have. This year, I want to try things that I learn, things that I know, I want to try to put into practice. Bin mirma, and trickery. So, mirma can mean, of course, like lying, cheating, any type of gnevas das. Gnevas das means presenting a false image, even though what I'm doing is not an outright lie. So let's say I'm a teacher in school. I call on a certain young lady and I say, did you do your homework today? Now, she doesn't want to lie. So what does she do? She goes, now, the truth is, that was not her homework. Those were her notes from social studies. But she didn't lie. She didn't say, here it is. But she definitely meant to give me the impression that her homework was done when it was not. That's called gnevas das, and that falls under the realm of mirma. This would include, sometimes I'm in the middle of a conversation with a certain person, and I don't want to really sound like I just don't know what they're talking about, because that makes me feel not so smart. So I kind of put on the image as if, yes, I know just what you mean. You're sitting at a Shabbos table and they're speaking about Divrei Torah, and somebody quotes, well, according to Rav Moshe Feinstein, the halacha is, now, I don't know what he's talking about, but I'm like, oh yeah, right. Now I can say wow, that's fascinating, thank you so much. But to give that image as if I know when it's not, isn't so detrimental to them. I'm not cheating them, but it's detrimental to me because I'm creating for myself a non-authentic vision of who I really am and trying to present that as who I am. So this year, I'm saying to Hashem, this year, I don't want to be a person of mirma. I want to be straight and honest with my own presentation. I remember one time when I was still living in LA, one of my long-term avodas in life is timing. So I was going to a certain interview, and I left a good 15 minutes too late. And I was under a lot of stress and under a lot of pressure. And as I'm driving to where I need to go, there was major traffic jam and congestion on the turnpike in LA. And I was so relieved, because I remember thinking, great, when I get to the interview, I'll just say to them, oh, I am so sorry, traffic was an accident and traffic was all backed up. Now that wouldn't have been a lie, but that really wasn't the complete, honest presentation of why I was late. I could have said, oh, I'm really so sorry I was late, traffic was really busy and I probably left a little later than I should have. So Mirma is playing around with those little white lies of truth, and this year I'm saying to Hashem, I want to be honest straight through. We all know there are 3 situations when a person is allowed to lie. One of those being, and one of the main ones being for shalom, particularly for shalom bayis. Now for shalom means not because I don't want the other person to be angry at me because I want to protect myself, but not to create hurtfulness within the other person because I feel they would be so hurt by it. The typical example of this was with Sara Imenu, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells her that, tells Avram that she was laughing not about him being old, but about her being old, and it is appropriate not to share true information about a spouse or what they said that will cause the other spouse to be angry at the other one. What did I use yesterday?
The other way?
Another one. Oh, this says wet erase. Uh-oh. Maybe this only erases with wet.
Here, give me that wet right here.
Here's an napkin. Here's a napkin, please.
You want
Renee.
You want a napkin?
Oh, that's good, isn't it? Thank you. Let's try this. Yep. Right.
We have this corner here.
Thank you. There you go. Thank you so much. Okay, those were our dalits. Moving on to the letter A. Now, again, the goal of this video is not to be overwhelmed. It's not like, oh my goodness, there is so much, but little things to just increase my own self-awareness so that the upcoming year I can be more aware as things are happening. Hey, al chet shechatanu lefanecha de hirhur halev. Is that the right one? No? Yes. Yeah. De hirhur halev. Okay. Hirhurim are thoughts. Thoughts. Hirhurim are thoughts. Thoughts. So hirhur halev is things that I've done wrong with the thoughts of my heart, in my inner thoughts. So for this we have to ask 2 questions. First of all, is a person halachically responsible for having negative thoughts? So wait a minute. Somebody does something that's hurtful to me. I feel hurt. I feel angry. I did an avera? Or somebody has something that I'm feeling jealous about. So by having a jealous feeling, I'm being over an avera? I mean, that's question number 1. Number 2, are we really in control of our thoughts? Are thoughts something that we control? So I'm seeing a lot of yeses. So I learned a very important klal from Rav Noach Orlowick, which you probably have heard, but I'll review it again. We are never responsible for the initial thoughts or feelings that come into our heart and come into our minds. If I see something that somebody else has and I'm feeling jealous of it, I am human. I am not doing an avera, I am not a rasha. That's a normal human feeling. The question is, once that thought or that feeling begins, what do I choose to do with it? Do I choose to continue holding on to it, building it more and more in my mind? Or do I make a conscious decision, I want to move my own inner eye to a different place, to a different thought process? And that's the part we do have control over. We don't have control over feeling hurt. But after I feel hurt, the question is, what do I do with that feeling? Now, I can spend the next 10 minutes afterwards thinking, I can't believe she did that to me. This isn't the first time she's done that to me. I remember 3 months ago, she did another thing which was very similar too. And her parents used to do, right? I can continue building it. Now, the next time I see this person, you can bet it's going to be really hard for me to smile at her. Not only that, but I may be exploding at her. Then, the avera that I do with my speech to her is a conglomerate of all the herhure halev that I have continued building up. So what I'm saying to Hashem in this al-chet is, yes, I do have some control, not over the initial thoughts, but I do have control over what I do with it. And this year, I'm going to try to be a little more channeling and directing my own inner thought patterns to positive places. This would include the mitzvah of being dam l'katzachus. When I see somebody do something that really is wrong, not necessarily saying it was right, but saying, where was she coming from at that time? Maybe she was under a lot of stress. I know what it's like to be under a lot of stress. Maybe she was exhausted. Maybe she's dealing with very difficult things at home. Maybe she didn't mean it to come forth that way. But that is the herhure halev where I can redirect. Herhure halev will also include watching or reading types of material that make future nisyonos harder for me to do. So, I teach in schools. Girls will often say to me, like, what's so bad with watching certain types of movies? I'm not doing anything wrong. It's just herhure halev. It's just things happening inside my heart. But the truth is, if I continue watching again and again certain levels of violence, certain levels of immorality, certain levels of lack of tznius, then in school when they talk about Avas Yisrael and looking at the good in every person and having relationships that are not physically based but are spiritually based, it's much harder for me to really connect and relate to those concepts because my emotional reality is at a very different place. So what I'm saying to Hashem here is, I want my inner thought patterns to be ones that take me to a higher place and not a lower place. There's no avera in just thinking nothing. Sometimes I need to just chill out and distract myself. But when I'm sitting and waiting for a bus, when I'm waiting online at the bank, the herhure halev can be a choice. I can review in my mind certain things that I learned that I found very inspiring. I can review certain halachos that I learned inside my head. Then, an hour later, maybe I'll be a little more careful with that halacha in action. Or maybe my level of avas Hashem will be a little deeper when I do my next mitzvah because I reminded myself of that inspirational thought. So those herhure halev will now impact my future actions and speech. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking responsibility and I'm saying to Hashem, last year, not all my hirhurim where I wish they would have been. This year I'm going to try to uplift those hirhurim. And the second page of Page Chatzanu L'Fanecha B'Hona'as Reach, that's the beginning of the next sheet. Hona'a means hurting or harming Reah, a friend. Now, halachically, there are two different halachos about hona'ah, of hurting a friend. There's something called ona'as mamon, which is harming someone else financially. And there's another called ona'as devar, which is harming another person through words. Each of these is a separate mitzvah lo ta'aseh, the oraisa, that is aser to do and that's damaging. So ona'as mamon will mean anything where I unrightfully took away or harmed somebody else's financial status. I borrowed something from somebody and I forgot to return it or never returned it. If that's the thing I want to work on for the year, keep yourself a borrowing list, write it down each time I borrow something, make sure I cross it out each time I return. Borrowing something and then returning it, but not in the condition that I got it, so that the person's object is financially devalued or not worth the same amount that it was before. This would include driving and scratching somebody else's car or causing damage to their vehicle and not taking responsibility to pay back for that thing. Ona'as mamon even includes in a business. Halachically, a Jewish businessman is not allowed to charge more than 6% over the highest market value of that item. Even though it's the customer's choice whether they want to buy the item or not, overcharging to that degree is considered a form of ona'a and harming somebody else financially. This would also include not going into a Jewish person's store where I know I'm not going to buy the item and then just say, oh, how much does this cost? Where I'm raising the storekeeper's hopes that I'm going to buy the item and I really have no intention to buy it all. In a certain sense, I'm wasting his time because I'm asking him questions and I'm not buying it. If I think I might buy it and I'm just trying to compare, that's not ona'a at all. That is fine. Just one or two additional examples. If a person is selling something, halachically, they have to point out any defects in that item that are not obvious to the eye. So let's say I'm selling an apartment or renting an apartment. I don't have to point out to the guy, the walls here are going to need painting. He can look and see that on his own. But if the plumbing doesn't work well, or if the heating system doesn't work well, I cannot sign that rental agreement without letting him know first. You should just be aware you're going to have to fix this thing. So those would all be parts of ona'as mamon. Ona'as devarim would mean harming people through words. So what's the difference between lashon hara and ona'as devarim? Go ahead.
Hara is about somebody else, and ona'as devarim directly.
Exactly. Lashon hara is if I'm speaking about somebody else in a negative way. You know what she did to me, or I don't like her at all, or she's always like. Ona'as devarim is using hurtful words to the person's face that I know will hurt them. Now, this doesn't have to mean outright insults, like, you idiot, you stupid, right? Anything that I know to that person will be hurtful is ona'as devarim, especially if my intention is to dig in, to hit their soft spot. So two girls in a class, they just got back the tests. One girl did really well. She stands up and she says, like, wow, I can't believe it, that was such an easy test. Now, she didn't say anything outrightly like, you stupid heads, but she was purposely kind of trying to say, like, look what I did, look how everybody else did. We do ona'a most often very much to our own family members, because they are the ones who we know exactly what are the points that really hurt, and when we are a little annoyed or a little frustrated, it's easiest to choose those words that we know will be a dig for them. That's why Rabbi Reisman in Brooklyn points out, when you talk about hona'as reya, who's really our reya? Sameach to re'im ha'ahuvim, it's really our spouse. So this is the viduy, where I can take responsibility for times during the year where I caused harm or insult to my spouse or to any other person through the words that I said. Now, of course, to get complete teshuva, I have to apologize and ask mechila from that person too, and make sure they're meichel me. But it's not enough that they meichel me. Since it's an avera d'oraisa, I have to take responsibility in front of Hashem also, and say, this year, I'm going to try to be more aware of what words that I'm saying. Any questions? Great. Vavs. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha viduy peh. Viduy is confession. Peh is the mouth. Averos that I did by confessing with my mouth. Now we just said it's a mitzvah on Yom Kippur to confess. That's not an avera. What's the avera? So Rav Dessler says, here we're talking about a confession where the confession is really only done from the mouth but not from the heart. So he says these are things, kabbalos, that people make that are not coming bifnim halev, from their real depths of their own inner heart. They make them superficially, or sometimes we make them like, yeah, sure, I think I should do this, but without a real sense of commitment to those things. So here I am, standing and doing viduy in front of Hashem, and one of the viduyim I'm saying is, Hashem, I'm embarrassed over the fact, to be honest, that some of my viduyim may not be accompanied by such a sincere, deep desire to really change this thing as much as I wish I could. Please know, I wish I could be better in that. So, viduy peh can be to Hashem, viduy peh can be to other people. So, in high school, before Yom Kippur, people run around and say, "Are you machli? Are you machli? Machli?" What they're really saying is, I don't want to get punished. I don't want to get punished. I don't want to get punished. Please let me off the hook. It's not necessarily like, I really feel bad. I know during the year I did hurtful things to you. So in a certain sense, that's viduy peh. I'm saying it, but I don't really mean it. This would include, sometimes, we apologize to people, but the apology doesn't really take responsibility, it throws the blame. So it's kind of like, I'm really sorry I said those words to you, but if you wouldn't have really ticked me off and said those things first, so then I'm not really taking responsibility. I'm saying it's your fault, not my fault in the first place. So all these things, I'm saying this year, Hashem, when I admit, I want to really acknowledge my part, my responsibility in whatever I did wrong, and I want to really be committed to trying to change those things. Now maybe I should just mention briefly, if somebody apologizes to me, what is my responsibility for forgiveness? Let's say somebody really damaged me physically or emotionally, and it's really very hard to forgive. So halachically, if a person has a certain spiritual weakness or emotional weakness, I really can look at them or frame them in my head as having almost like a physical defect. If I had somebody in my house who, let's say, was handicapped, or their hands shake, so when they come over, I'm not going to leave delicate things on my table. So I'm going to protect myself from being harmed because I know that this is their situation. But I'm not angry at them because I pity them that they are limited by that physical defect that they have. So if I look at another person and I say, if you've borrowed things from me and not returned them, and now you're saying, are you meichel me? I can tell you, I'm meichel you because I know that this is probably your spiritual weakness that you're struggling with in life. That doesn't mean that next week when you ask me to borrow something, I have to lend it out to you again. Until I see that this has been improved and that this is something you've taken care of, I can still protect myself from that thing again. Now, if I'm finding it really hard to forgive somebody because of the level of hurt that I felt, halachically, I am able to request from them certain expectations or certain needs that I have in order to be able to forgive them. So I can say, you know what, I really would like to be able to forgive you. The thing that happened was so hurtful to me that I really would need us to first meet and talk one-on-one and discuss it so that I can really explain to you how I felt and understand where you were coming from. A woman, and this is not a halachic statement, but a woman was telling me that her high school daughter was bullied by a friend of hers for about 2 years when she was in 7th and 8th grade. And there was a lot of emotional trauma that was inflicted during that time. And they really worked on helping her through it, helping her establish her boundaries, not be so connected to this girl, get her own friends in a different level. But the two girls have very little to do with each other at this point. They're in separate classes already, they're not connected. Now she's in 11th grade. And this girl, who's in the other class, recently just texted her, "Are you meichel me?" Those are the 4 words, "Are you meichel me," right? So this girl says, you know what, I'd like to be able to, but I can't just wipe away these years of hurt just by 4 words of "Are you meichel me?" So one of the other people at my shiur, who happens to be a therapist and a social worker, said, maybe it would be worthwhile to suggest that the two of them meet with a third party, a mentor, a social, and have them discuss and rework through so that they can both come to a mutual understanding. And then maybe she'll be able to come to a different place of apology and of mechila. So when we're talking about viduy peh, what I'm saying to Hashem is I really want to try to really sincerely address any hurt that was caused and be able to really work it through in an honest, real way. Those are the vavs. Vav number 2. V'al chet shechatanu lefanecha bevidas znus. What's a va'ad? An aid is a witness. A vad is a committee or a group. In Eretz Yisrael, sometimes they say, everybody coming, we're having a big vad hisover, with like a big gathering to be misover. The Ohel Moed, Vav Ayin Daled, was the meeting place between Hashem and us. So V'idas Nus will mean a gathering place or a meeting place for znus, literally for immorality. So the literal explanation of this viduy is, Hashem, I realized that some of the things I did wrong, the root cause of why I did them wrong is that I was present or attending a gathering where the level of morality that was going on over there was not one that was uplifting, and therefore it dragged me down too. Maybe my mode of dress wasn't my own level of standard of what I thought it should have been. Maybe my level of socializing and connection with others wasn't at the level that I should have thought it should have been. Maybe the things that I was seeing and watching over there wasn't where I wanted it to be. So I'm not talking about the avera that I did. I'm saying the root cause of some of my averas is I don't want to be at meeting places that are lewd, that are immoral. And that's my commitment for this year. I'm going to try not to take myself to those kinds of places. But literally, znus doesn't only mean immorality. We say in Shema every day, what does liznot mean? To wander, to turn away, to veer off. Now, of course, in a devoted, committed relationship between a man and a wife, znus is the ultimate act of turning away, of non-loyalty and non-dedication to the other person. That's why it's called znus. So v'idas znus also means sometimes I was at a meeting or a gathering place where people were turning away from Hashem and from spiritual standards, and that's what ended up bringing me to a lower place. So if I know that when I sit in certain groups, they're always getting into Lashon Hara discussions. So I can say to Hashem, I'm sorry, I was part of that v'idas znus. That isn't the environment that's going to take me to where I want to go. If I attended certain classes when I was in graduate school, when I was in college, and the atmosphere and the discussions in the class were very kfira-oriented, and that caused me struggles afterwards in emunah, I can say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or even certain social places, the kinds of discussions that are being brought up really make me have questions or doubts about my own moral standards or about Hashem. So I'm saying to Hashem, this year, I don't want to be part of va'adim, or meeting places where it's zoneh from Hashem. I want to go to places like Lori Martin's house, where the atmosphere is one that really helps us grow as a person. Letter Zayin. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bezilzul, is that the next one around? Bezadon ubishgaga. Zadon means on purpose, and shgaga is by accident. And here we're saying to Hashem, there are two root reasons sometimes I do averos. Sometimes I know full well that I'm doing it, and I do it anyway. I'm embarrassed about that, because I wish I would have had the strength to just do what you wanted. Bishgaga means sometimes I didn't even realize. I'm in the middle of talking, and then I suddenly say to myself, uh-oh, I think this is Lashon Hara. Or I didn't know the halacha about a certain thing. Or I forgot. I forgot it was Shabbos, and I turned on the light switch. Are we responsible in halacha for an avera that's done bishgaga? Right, we discussed that yesterday, right? Did we? Yes, but why? I was by accident, I didn't know. The answer is, things that are really important to me, I don't forget about. I really remember. So most people don't wake up the morning of their own chasana and say, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. I'm getting married tonight. I totally forgot. Why? This event is so absorbing my whole being and my whole essence that I can't forget it for a moment. If Shabbos, to me, was as all-enveloping and all-encompassing as that, there is no way in my value system I could forget it. So this is saying like, oh, I didn't realize Shkia passed and I didn't daven mincha, or I forgot to bench, so on a certain level, there is some level of responsibility. It's not the same as amazing, but it does show something about my own value system if I find myself repeatedly doing certain shkados. I'm saying to Hashem this year, I want to up my own ante and make my value system one where I, as Hashem, won't forget. An avera that was done b'shkaga during the time of the Beis Hamikdash, a person would just go and bring the carbon chatas. And that's why later on in the viduy, we're going to say, Va'al chata'im sh'anu chayavim aleihem karban chatas. When I say that, I'm really saying all the averas that I did last year that were b'shgaga. Zayin number 2, Al chet shechatanu lefanecha be'zilzul horim u'mamim.
Yeah.
Yeah. My mother can testify on this one. Zilzul literally means to disgrace, devalue. The 2-letter shorish of the word zilzul is zol. Zol is when you buy something cheap. Right? Yakar is expensive, zol is cheap. Zilzul is any act or word which makes the other person feel cheapened, feel not valued for who they are. The opposite of zilzul is kavod. What's the 3-letter Hebrew shorish of kavod? Kaved. Heavy. On a physical level, when something is kaved, when it's heavy, it means you can feel its weight. You can feel its presence. Its presence makes a difference. It matters. So when you put an item on a scale and the weight is there, it moves the scale. Let's say a person walks in the room and I want to express a sense of kavod. What do? Stand up. You know what I'm saying? Your presence in this room has weight. It has value. I can't just continue sitting and talking on the phone or sitting in my chair when you walked in. I feel your weight. It moves the scale of me and I have to stand up. The mitzvah regarding horim, parents, or morim, teachers, is twofold. With parents, there is a halacha of kibud horim, and there is a halacha of yiras horim. Both of these will be included in the viduy of zilzul horim umorim. What are the halachas of kavod? I know you've been sitting 5 hours listening to shiur and you just needed a little something. Thank you. Kavod. Thank you. Kavod is always doing a positive act that shows my sense of value and respect to that person. So all the halachas of kavod, kibud horim, are doing things for them. The halachas include getting them food and drink. That means if I'm shopping for my parents, I can have in mind I'm doing the mitzvah of kibud horim. Buying the food is enough if they can prepare it for themselves. But if they can't prepare it for themselves, part of it includes cooking it for them. So if I send over food for Shabbos and I'm cooking it for my parents, I can have in mind I'm doing kibud avayim. Dressing them, which means getting them the clothing needs that they need, buying it for them, and if they physically need the actual help dressing, taking care of that. Escorting them to where they need to go. So this will include driving them to an appointment that they need. When they leave the house, walking them out. It's always a mitzvah to be malazeh anybody out. But with parents particularly, that livui is a mitzvah of kavod also. And in addition, anything that they value because it shows them their sense of weight is important. So if, for my mother, she loves getting Mother's Day cards. For me, sending a Mother's Day card will be kibud avein, because it gives her a sense of her kavod. For some people it will mean, this also will include standing for them when they walk in the room or the house. Now, this doesn't mean if they're going back and forth, I have to keep standing every minute. But that means that, like, when they first walk in from outside, showing that their presence makes a difference by standing up. If they're meichel and they don't care, I'm not halachically obligated to do it, to continue doing it. However, many people encourage doing it anyway, not for them, but for the person who's doing it, to encourage their own development of that sense of kavod. Yira is a sense of distance, of awe. Kavod is closeness and respect. Yira is, we're not peers, we're not colleagues. So this will all be mitzvahs lo ta'aseh, of things I'm not allowed to do. That includes not sitting in their chair with their special place in shul or at home. This will include not contradicting something that they said. This will include not even affirming something that they said. Meaning, like, oh, you're right. Now that would sound like it's respectful. I'm telling them you're right. But when I tell somebody else they're right, what am I really saying? You and me, we're peers. We're colleagues. We're on the same level, and I can give you an evaluative opinion of what I think of your perspective. So Yira means we're not equals. I may be very close to you, but we're not friends and peers. I have a sense of yira and awe for who you are above, and therefore I will not even agree with what you said. So this is the viduy, where I get to say to Hashem, there were times that maybe I wasn't so thoughtful, I wasn't so aware, I didn't take opportunities to give the kavod that I may have wanted to, or I was speaking in a way that wasn't one of yira, and therefore there was zilzul, that was cheapening of my parent that went on. I regret that I did it, and this year I want to be more respectful of who they are. Kibud horim does not end after a parent passes away. Anything that a child continues doing that is le'ilui nishmas that parent, the learning of mishnayos, the saying kaddish by the yard site, is a continued expression of kavod for who they are. Morim would be the same thing. That means that if we can think back to our own histories, if we remember any teachers out there that we really, tortured or gave them a really very hard time, this is the time before Yom Kippur to try to make sure we approach them if we still have access to who they are, and write them a nice Shana Tova card and tell them, I am so sorry when I was younger and I was so immature, I did or said whatever I did. Halachically, the halacha of kibud morim applies to whichever teacher or rebbe taught me most of the Torah that I know. He is considered my moreh, or my rebbe, and he is the one that I have the greatest obligation of expression of kavod towards. Okay. We're at 10 to 4. Keep going. Anybody who needs to go, please just go. I'm going to try to get through men, so I will just keep going, and anybody who can and wants to stay b'vakasha, and when who needs to leave b'vakasha. Ches. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chozek yad. Chozek yad literally means by the strength of the hands. What does that mean? Force. So this means averos that I did because I was in a position of power and the other person was forced into whatever they had to do because they had no option out. So this could be if I'm a CEO or a boss of a certain company, if I am a teacher in a classroom, if I am a counselor in a camp, and I use that position sometimes to take advantage or make somebody else feel low about themselves, that would be b'chozek yad. I took my control and I used it negatively. This will also include times when I coerced somebody against their will to do something they really didn't want to do. So you know when it's like they said no, and then I nudge them, and I nag them, and I nudge them, and I nag them, and they finally give in? So that's like b'chozek yad. I'm like pushing them into doing something that really wasn't what they wanted to do in the first place.
Does
Go
that
ahead.
apply to something positive? To them doing something positive?
Excellent question. Does that apply to encouraging them or pressuring them to do something positive that they're not so excited about doing? So again, I don't know if the halacha here, but for my when I'm putting together, the Beis Din is allowed to give malkos to insist that a husband say, give a get. Now, a get has to be given by will. So how can they give him malkos to do it? But the assumption is people's deepest down real will is to do good. But people get blocked by their own laziness issues. So therefore, encouraging them to do good things and helping them get there, I don't think would be part of this. This would involve more like, let's say I'm renting out a house to somebody and I tell them, oh listen, by the time you move in, the refrigerator will be in and all the wiring will be in place. And then I'm not so on top of it and I don't really take care of it. And they move in 3 weeks later and the things aren't in place. Now, they're not going to move out. They need the apartments. So they're kind of stuck. Now, in that situation, you could say, but I didn't do an aveira. The chozek yad, I kind of took advantage of a situation where somebody had no other choice, and I put them into that position. Or, somebody takes a taxi somewhere, and then once they get there, they jump out of the taxi and don't pay the bill. Like, what is the taxi driver going to do over there? He's going to, follow the person into the house. But you left him in a situation where he can't recoup the money, and there's nothing he could do about it. So I'm saying that this year, I'm going to trying to be more aware that when I'm in a position of power or of strength, I'm going to use it not to knock people or take advantage of other people. I'm only going to try to use it to uplift. ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בחילול Hashem. We know Chilul Hashem is actually the worst Aveira in the Torah. It's the one Aveira that it says that a person, even after they do Teshuva, can't get complete kapara until Yom HaMisa, until their actual moments of death. So what is Chilul Hashem? The word Chilul comes from the three-letter Shoresh, Halal, which is a void, a vacuum, an empty space. We say, we have empty spaces within our bodies. Chilul Hashem is a situation where I do an act that makes people feel as if the world is void of God, as if there's a vacuum or an absence of Hashem in the world. Now, halachically, there are 3 situations that would be the most major expressions of Chilul Hashem. Number 1, if a person is over on any of the big 3 Aveiros in public. Because when people see another person murder someone else, when someone sees somebody commit Gilui Arayos, the ultimate act of immorality, or Avodah Zarah, it makes people really feel as if there's no godliness in the world. There's no value that has to be stood up for. So that's the worst Chilul Hashem. Then, during the time of Shema, during the time of persecution, a person being over any Aveira publicly would be an act of Chilul Hashem, because it makes the goal of the Goyim who are persecuting is to show the world, values are gone. So anytime people compromise on their values, they are indicating values really are gone. That is all. I'm sure you've heard the story of the head of Arachim, Yossi Wallace. Oh my goodness, unbelievable story. I'll tell you very, very briefly. His grandfather was in the Holocaust. His father was also in the Holocaust. And he was in the camps for about 2 to 3 years. But he was not in the death camps, he was in labor camps. So he was able to work and survive most of the time. It came the time when the Nazis themselves knew that the Allies were on their way and that the liberation was coming. So they gathered together the remaining members within the camp, sat them down in a circle. Now his grandfather was known as like the religious rabbi figure of the group. So they called him into the center and they said, you know and we know full well that it's just a number of days or weeks until you're going to be liberated. This man had been careful the whole time when he was in the labor camp to not eat treifos as much as he could. And I'm not saying that's halachically obligatory, but he was. They pulled out a piece of pork and they said to him, if you want to survive, to find your wife, to find your children, he didn't know at that point what had happened to them. You eat this pork in front of everybody else and you will live. If you don't, you will die today. And this man had the strength, and he said, I will not eat it. And they counted down. They said, either you will eat it by the count or you will be shot. And he ended up being shot. And that was the end. His daughter survived the labor camps, moved to Eretz Yisrael with the Aliyah movement, and like most of the Aliyah movement, she was not frum. She also had she was angry at what she had gone through. And she brought up her children not frum, including this man, Yossi Wallace. Yossi grew up totally secular, but he had heard the story throughout growing up about his grandfather in the camps and how he had died. He ended up getting married to a nice, refined, secular woman, started a family together. He had a very good job and position as a CEO. One day his wife called him after work and she said, listen, I'm so exhausted, I really don't have energy to make supper. Do you mind just stop off and pick up some food for us on the way home? So he stops on the way back at a restaurant which was unfortunately a very popular restaurant in Israel called Hapil Halavan, the white elephant. Now the reason this was a popular restaurant is that they sold there basar lavan. Basar lavan was pig meat in Israel, and since in most areas you have some level of rabbanut, this was something considered a little bit of a treat for people who are looking for something different. So he stops at Hapil Lavan, and he's waiting online to get sandwiches for him and his wife and his family. And he's standing there online, and at a certain point, it hit him, my grandfather gave his life not to eat pig meat. And here I am, standing online to go and eat some pig meat. So he said, either I'm crazy or my grandfather was crazy. I really don't know what. And he got off the line and he said, I have to just explore. I have to find out more. And he did his own learning, and he went to Arachim seminars at the beginning stages of Arachim. He ended up being Choser B'Teshuva. He is now the CEO, the head of the whole Arachim, which every year is being machzir b'siyata d'shmaya, hundreds, and at this point thousands of Israelis b'tshuva. The choices that a person makes anti-chilul Hashem never get lost and never get dissipated. It might get lost for one generation, but the impact ends up carrying on and on and on. So that's the second situation of chilul Hashem. Situation number 3 would be any act where a frum Jew does something disgraceful or non-ethical that makes other people say, if this is a person of godliness, there's really no God here, right? So if a frum person is dishonest in business, if a frum person walks around with torn clothing, stained clothing. Now, the halacha says that a Rav or a Talmud Chacham is not allowed to walk around with stains on his clothing, because people are going to look and say, this is a representative of Torah. Nowadays, the amount of religious Jews that there are in the world, we are all Talmidei Chachamim. We are all Rabbanim. We all represent. When we walk out in Cedarhurst in Manhattan, everybody can identify a frum Jew. So we have to be very aware we are representing Kiddush Hashem in terms of who we are, And we're saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I regret any acts that I did which made that halal. The ultimate Chilul Hashem can even be within a person's own inner self, where a person does an act which makes them feel as if Hashem is not really there. And on that level, in a certain sense, anytime we do any Avera, there is a certain aspect of Chilul Hashem in every Avera we do. Because at that moment, I was really becoming oblivious to Hashem's existence. All I was feeling was me and what I want and what I feel at that moment. So this is what we're doing Tshuva for here. That reminds me, I skipped one little detail that I should just add in on the Dalet. When we went back before Vadas the Mirma, we said Mirma meant trickery, and we spoke about Bnei Bastas and tricking others. I forgot to tell you Rav Dessler. Rav Dessler said, you know what the worst type of Mirma is? When a person tricks themselves. He says this is really the self-deceptive rationalizations that we do when I really don't want to have to do something correctly, and I trick myself into believing it's okay. So, are Mizonos rolls really Mizonos rolls, or are they hamotzi? Well, if I'm eating them as part of my meal, and I'm on an airplane, but I'm not in the mood to have to go wash, then I can trick myself into saying they can become Mizonos. All those mirma kinds of things. How do you know when those are happening? If you find yourself defending it too much in your head, like, yes, it's okay because of this, it's okay because of that, then I have to ask myself, but maybe not? How do I know it's really okay? Okay, those are the cheseds. Test. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בתשומת שפתיים, או תפשוט, which is stupidity of the mouth. So this would be just about talking in a silly way, and it brought me into empty, meaningless speech. This can include telling other people's secrets where I didn't really mean to, but I wasn't really thinking whether it was private information or not. It was just stupid. It was silly. I wasn't thinking as I spoke. ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בתשומת שפתיים. תשומת שפתיים means impurity of the lips, and this refers specifically to vulgar or coarse language. What's in Hebrew referred to as nivel peh. Now, for different people, this has different levels, right? For some people, it means we're actually working on not using curse words. For some people, it means trying to work on using more refined language, not saying stupid, not saying idiot, not doing those kinds. Why? Tuma, we said yesterday when we were talking about the timtum halev, means blockage. When I use those kinds of words, it blocks me from my own higher part of self, my more elevated part of self. And the Maharal says that tumas fasayim is actually more spiritually damaging to the person, to the speaker, than even Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara may be more damaging for the victim also, but for the speaker, tumas fasayim is worse. Why? So when a person speaks Lashon Hara, why are they going around speaking badly about others? What are they trying to feel about themselves?
More superior.
Bit more superior. I have the right to judge. So at least the desire is coming from a desire for self-elevation. I'm doing it the wrong way, but I'm trying to make myself feel high. When a person uses animalistic, coarse language, what they're really doing is they're identifying themselves with their own animalistic, coarse-based sense of self, and they're turning themselves into a more vulgar individual. So what I'm saying to Hashem is, I don't want to use words of negativity, even when I'm frustrated, even when I'm angry and upset. There's a level beyond which I will not let my speech go, because I don't want to concretize and make stronger that animalistic side of me. Yud. Maybe we won't get through mem. We'll get, okay. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha be-yetzer hara. Now that would seem to be self-explanatory. all Averos we do are because I had a Yetzer Hara to do them, right? But the word Yetzer literally also means Yotzer, to create. Rav Dessler says, these are Yitzarim, or inclinations that we create for ourselves. So he said sometimes we put ourselves in situations where we incite or start a stronger Yetzer Hara for something that I didn't have before. So let's say there's a girl who, in essence, is more of a soft, quiet, sanua kind of a girl. But she's often reading the types of magazines that are making her really see that savvy sophistication has to mean dressing in a certain way, presenting in a certain way, and being more bold. Now, she will now have a greater temptation or a greater yetzer to do certain things that she didn't have before. This wasn't in her nature. This was something that she almost self-created through the choices that she is making of what she is watching, where she is going, what she is doing. So I'm saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu this year, I want to create positive energies, not negative. Now, I should quickly also point out, the word Yetzer means creation. The thing that we get one of the greatest pleasures from in life is being creative. When I make a new painting, when I write a beautiful essay, when I compose a piece of music, when I choose goodness, I am creating. There's a Yetzer Tov and there's a Yetzer Hara. That means there's a positive form of creativity and a negative form of creativity. When somebody was hurt by somebody else and they explode at the other person, are they getting pleasure at that moment?
Yeah.
Later they may feel guilty, but at that moment, the only reason they're doing it is it feels good. Now, it feels good because I feel like, hello, you cannot put me down. I am me. I am going to show you my power and my energy of who I am. Afterwards, I feel really ugly about myself because I know that I damaged another person and I damaged myself. But at that moment, I was using my creative energy not to create positivity. What I'm saying to Hashem this year is, I want my yitzarim, my creative channeled energies, to be there to create shiurim, to start a VAD and a program for people, a support group for people who want to work on SNEOS. I want to use my creative energy to get Bikr Cholim growing. Yetzer Hatov, not Yetzer Hara. Ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'yodim u'b'lo yodim. Literally, people who know or people who don't know. So what I'm saying is sometimes I did Averos to people and they really knew I did it. I hurt them to their face and they were upset. Or below Yodim, sometimes they really had no clue that I even caused them damage and I really did damage them. So let's say somebody called me for a shidduch for somebody and I wasn't so careful with what I was allowed to say and what I wasn't allowed to say, and the words I say ended up discouraging that person from meeting the other person. Now, they didn't even know that I shared or I ruined that shidduch, but I did cause that damage to the person. By the way, do I have to ask mechila for that kind of thing? It's a big shaila. If being specific to that person will bring up more hurt, it's not so pashut that I should specify. In general, it's better to just go over to the person and say, you know, I know sometimes during the year I say things that I just shouldn't have said. I wasn't always careful with. I hope you're mindful if anything that I said that caused you any hurt or that caused you any damage, without specifying. And you should know you lost that guy. Right? That would be too negative. So, biyodim loyodim, people who knew or people who did not know. Comes Rav Dessler and says, we're not only talking about what I did wrong, we're talking about the root reason why I do things wrong. Sometimes I do things wrong, biyodim, because too many people know or see what I am doing, and therefore I don't feel comfortable doing what's right. So I usually daven mincha, but I'm in a place where nobody else is davening around me, and I feel really weird being the only one doing it. So why am I not doing what's right? Biyodin. Because too many people are there and watching me, and I don't feel comfortable living up to emes. What I'm saying to Hashem is, this year, I don't care who else knows, I want to be the person who is emes. Below Yodim is exactly the opposite. Sometimes, the reason I didn't do something good is nobody knew about it. Meaning, sometimes the only reason, not the only, but one of the main reasons I'm doing something good is everybody else around me is doing it, and I'm pulled into the flow in a positive way. But when nobody else is around, below Yodim, I don't have the same motivation to do what's right. So let's say after a certain event, everybody's going and clearing the chairs and helping the person put them away. So what do? I get up and I clear the chairs with everybody else. Now, part of it is for chesed, but part of it is, that's what everybody's doing. But when nobody else is around, do I live up to that same standard all the time? Not always, below Yodim. So what I'm saying to Hashem here is, this year, even when there's nobody else around and nobody else knows, I want to try to still live up to my best in your eyes. So we got to the Al Kulam Elo Aslicha Tzlach Lanu Mechal Lanu Kaper Lanu. Should that be our breaking point, Lori?
Yes.
Can we end it over here? I think that would be a good end. It's a lot already. You know what? If we got through the first 10 this year, Mitzvah Hashem, maybe next year we'll hit the next 10 and we'll finish the whole thing.
Next year we should have it all written out.
She's saying she can break them without having a meeting session.
Question? Yes.
What happens, and again, maybe I'm not understanding it, but let's say there's an Ohel that you really don't believe pertains to you. Like, let's say the one about I charge interest, okay? But if I didn't give anyone a loan this year, or even if I did, if I don't charge interest, then unless I'm misunderstanding it, what's my responsibility?
Excellent.
What do we do with that?
I hear. So Rav Dessler says, neshech, interest, isn't just gaining monetary interest. Interest means I lend you money or I do a chesed for you because I have something that I'm going to gain out of it, profit. It doesn't have to be only monetary profit. Let's say I do a nice thing to you because back in the back of my head I think, I'll watch your kid this time, and next time when I'm running late, I'll call you and you're going to watch my kid too. So on a certain level, my intention in doing this kindness is what I will receive in return. He says Neshech would include that also. Anything where my subconscious or partial goal is not just giving, but getting out of it, would it be included in my Isser of Neshech. If you talk about the Chav, which we have Kapat Shochad, which is taking bribes, you might say, I'm not a judge, I've never taken bribes, but what does a bribe really mean? I'm not going to give an honest evaluation because I have some money to gain out of it. It doesn't have to be money. Let's say I do an Avera because there's a certain personal status gain, flattery gain, prestige gain. He said that's Kapat Shochad too. Why am I saying these viduyim? So that next time, when I find myself in my mind rationalizing and saying, oh, it's not so bad if I do this, ask myself, do I have something to gain over here? If I have a profit to gain out of it, maybe I'm no gabadavar. Maybe I'm not evaluating this so honestly. And next time, I might do it differently. Right?
Okay, there is a case where clearly then what we're saying is that we truly don't, or I truly don't understand all the places. Then, because you're basically saying that every outplay clearly has something, and that there seriously is not an outplay who may not pertain to.
That is the chiddush of Rav Dessler. He says each one is not just a literal avera, but it's a whole category of types of attitudes that we have, which the more we understand them, the more we can stop falling into those traps. So I would recommend, if you get that art scroll, Yom Kippur Matzah,
You're better than
In the back of the Matzah, he goes through the Al-Chetz and he gives 3 lines under each one of what it includes. It's not as extensive, but it does give practical things also.
Is this from Dessler book in English that you're quoting from?
So it's Strive for Truth in English, but to be honest, he only gives 1 line on each thing. You can sit down with a friend and kind of work it through and think of applications, and which is what Heller gave and that I gave onward, but it is at least short ideas on each thing. I don't know which volume of Strive for Truth it is. I'm thinking that the myth is not for itself. The larger experience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was very nice.
Good to see you again. Have a good one. You too. Thanks for coming back.